Well, I did it. I did my second read of Shadow of the Torturer, which I thought I was going to spread out through a week, but the first day I did 40 pages. The next day I got to page 190 or something and thought, uh-oh, this isn't going to take 7 days. This is going to take more like 3 days. So there we are. There we are. And today I finished. So I finished it exactly the same speed as I did the first time, but I did get more out of it this second time. I did have my pen in hand, which helped me read it a little bit more intentionally. Uh, I had Google going for some of the words, root words and things like that. And I found that a lot of the enjoyment was kind of the Easter egg hunt of it all. Um, so I wanna go through some of the things that I have down here. As far as my enjoyment and what I got out of this second time overall. Uh, it was interesting. It was interesting the second time around. A bit more of a plus than my first time. I mean, some of it was the same general experience, but interesting. Starting with this resurrection and death sort of idea at the very start that the book has him coming out of this river and almost getting tangled in these lily pad roots or whatever was in there. And there's all sorts of powerful kind of things that could come out of that and evoke all sorts of ideas, I suppose, and how resurrection and coming out of water kind of is connected in some symbolic ways. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I didn't really clue into that the first time going through, but I certainly did the next time. And also that he's getting pulled down into the mud and into this world of light, and he doesn't really know how he got out of there. And even people are like, "Whoa, what the heck?" That was interesting. This coin that he gets at the start, and there's going to be spoilers, I guess, if you haven't read it. Even though I doubt I'll be, this is who knows, whatever. So just have that as a warning, I guess. But this coin he gets from Vidalis, that was very interesting to me. With it looked like it has like a spaceship on it, and it kind of maybe matches the spaceship on his mausoleum, where I think there's a fountain, a rose, and like a spaceship. And a lot of the intrigue is wondering who he is, like where he came from. And it almost is as if starting from this moment where he almost drowned is like this new life that he's going into, and he's going to go through the rites of passage. It's interesting to see these rituals that happen, even though it's so weird. Like, he's in this guild of torturers of all things, but that's just what he's been born into. Very interesting. I don't necessarily know. I mean, we have the reasons why he's saying there's no women in the guild, because they would go above and beyond the prescribed torture methods, which when you understand that there are layers to this, it's like he's telling the story, and then it's like it's been curated a couple times over before it has gone to us. Reminds me of a lot of the ancient historians like Herodotus. You have to kind of take what they say with a grain of salt because often they're compiling stories that have been, already second or third hand before they got to him, and then he's giving the history based on that, and you wonder what kind of telephone game has happened. I mean, I wonder about his memory, and there's clear that there's some interesting contradictions in that, but you go into it with that framework that this is being built upon over time, and maybe comes with someone's biases as they. Anyway, this coin is interesting, and the idea that kind of is echoed early on. Like I love the first third of this. I lost interest a little bit for the second third, second two thirds again, which I think probably a lot of people love. But the idea of we kind of create, we think of something and then we create that thing, rather than the other way around, and that has to do with like this. Sorry, this is going to be all over, but like chapter 5 with he goes into this area that's like a big sundial or something, and he says, "Oh, this is what did he say? I even wrote it down. Is that what you call it, the atrium of time, because of the dials, I suppose? No, the dials were put there because we call it that." And there is something kind of deep to that, even though on its own, just saying it here maybe wouldn't so much. But it's interesting to see some of that kind of uh, creative process happening in a number of different ways. It's kind of, I don't know if I'm on to, like I'm grasping onto that idea of what he was trying to say, even not exactly able to say it myself. But that was interesting. Um, yeah, let me go on so I don't go on a tangent too much with that. The city Nessus, I looked that up, and that's Nessus is that the Greek centaur that killed Heracles with the poisoned shirt. I didn't clue into that until I looked up. I knew Nessus was Greek, but I couldn't remember that specific thing. The three-legged dog with the try as part of his name, it reminded me of a lot of old names where a part of who they are is within their name themselves. Um, so it's interesting that that would be the name that would eventually be put onto that dog, whether it was a later time or what. I think that's kind of interesting. It reminds me, biblical things, but also where some of the Native American tribes is like they'd have their first name, but they wouldn't get their last name until they did something of note that kind of defined them, and then that's kind of a part of their name, which I think is sort of interesting. Not saying that that's what's happening here with the dog, but that it's almost that it kind of reminds you of, some of these names that they're having probably aren't likely their names that they had, but it's like their archetype that they're in. I mean, that's what I would assume. Um, you see names from uh, that remind you of things like Charles Dickens, some of his novels, some ideas of things that happen. Anyway, very interesting. We have Rot Cod, the curator is just like Rot Cod from Gormenghast, the guy who dusts off the artwork and the statues and things. Like I got those vibes from that, which was interesting. I again like another Easter egg hunt sort of idea, but in general, I'll give you my final thoughts at the end of it. But like these are the Easter eggs that I thought were interesting. I think there's probably a lot of subtext with the library and the blind guy. It's like this curator, um, who used to have all these, he'd read all these things, but now he's blind. It's like, what good is being in a dark library? It means it's not really for the librarian, but for everyone else. Like, I think that's kind of poignant, and interesting. I don't know if there's more that I'm sure there's a ton I'm missing with that specific character and scene and ideas, and the books that were given are interesting. Um, let's see. The stuff with Thekla is interesting, and especially with like the fake Thekla at the brothel or whatever, and like the fake different versions of these, the counterfeits of these different ones. And it seems like there was again a like a stained glass window, maybe going back to like the Garden of Eden temptation there, which it totally fits what's happening in the scene. Um, hmm. But he falls in love with Thekla, which I thought is an interesting kind of thing. That first, there's other things that are uh, as he's going through this process through the guild and being loyal to the guild. Obviously, some of the things that are happening within him are taking him another way, which is interesting. His dreams are a little bit confusing. And some of the stuff where there's references to like saints all over, and Greek characters all over. I suppose if I had a database of what all of these were and these Eastern sorts of names, and what their stories are, it's like you would immediately know the archetype of the character kind of being. It's like as soon as you would reference a character and say something like, um, I mean, Dracula would be on the nose, but I can't even think of, if a character came in and was called um, Zeus or something, like before even the character says a line, you already have this great frame of reference to place onto that character, and it seems like that happens a fair bit of, a lot in this. Uh, um, let's see. I did like the ritual stuff, and how this, this Fulgian cloak was in. I don't even know if that's how you say that, but they would be between, totally blotting out the light between the light and the client. Which, it's interesting that these torturers are doing this very much. It's very surgical, surgically, but it's very cold and just matter of fact, and they just, it's very distant from, it's very distant emotionally what they are doing, and it makes it an interesting place for this character to kind of, you know leave from. Like, if he has any of this, he shows any of this closeness, even just a little bit, even just to offer the mercy of giving a knife for someone to kill themselves, which, I mean, it's still horrific what's happening. But even that little thing, it's like this reverse Garden of Eden story where it's like, you are not worthy of our guild here, uh, and you have to leave now. Uh, let's see. I don't exactly follow everything about this sword that's happening, and maybe some connections with that. Same with the gem in the altar, the claw of the conciliator, which I assume is just a holy gem. I was trying to find some extra things with that. I didn't exactly. I don't know if I have to go to book 2 to really get more about that. Even though it's interesting to see these things like the sword and the artifact and the claw gem and the coin and the cloak and a lot of these things that probably mean a number of things. The sharing a room with Baldander sure seems like Ishmael sharing a room with Queequeg and Moby Dick. His dream is odd here. The one where he's flying, and another where he's in the water, and another where he's like watching a show or something, like a puppet show or something. I'm sure there's a bunch there, and Talos, Dr. Talos, being this like scuzzy kind of salesman. I don't know. Like I'm sure there's other things that he's alluding to, right? Um, the challenge, the meeting in the sanguinary field is clearly a reference to the field of blood. Uh, what else do I have? The gardens. I mean, we could go on forever about that. Other people could. I couldn't because I feel like all I got was it's like preservation of different eras and like seeing a glimpse of different spots like this botanical gardens, which reminds me of like an ancient Babylon or like a Mediterranean, like a Riviera kind of spot. The bog with the people preserved, almost pickled in this bog. Like I do wish I knew exactly what that even is referring to. The mirrors and Father Inire and Einire or Inire. He seems to be some kind of alien or something. Somebody who is able to live for a long time. I don't know. But there's some weird like time things going on. I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the next in Claw the Conciliator or whatever happens. Let's see. I could probably count some of this, but I did find that a lot of this was Easter eggs and finding those Easter eggs. I don't know if I enjoyed it anymore the second time. I'm sure if like I do still put out there wondering what it is people are enjoying. Like I'm not poo-pooing the book for being. I mean, it's for people liking it. Like the prose is interesting, and there are very poignant points being made throughout. But I didn't find it enjoyable as an enjoyable experience, uh, like an enjoyable story necessarily. I didn't find the characters interesting. I know people probably love Severian. I think he's as boring as any character I might have ever read. Some people would probably think, you know, but I don't understand still. Like I feel like when I'm reading this for both times, I feel like I've just spent thousands of dollars flying to Paris and I'm in the Louvre and everyone's looking at these paintings. People are hugging each other and some are maybe crying and they're just having this experience where I'm looking around and I just don't really know what what it is people are really loving about it, if it's this kind of building process of seeing what he's referring to, and like that's what I got out of it. um and I mean there's poignant things happening, but I still don't quite understand what it is. And I don't think you would want me to come on and like say how amazing it is if I just didn't quite connect with it in that way. Now, I think I will go to book two at some point. I don't especially feel drawn to the next one. Something interesting, like reading through this, more and more you can see how it has inspired or really influenced Christopher Rocchio in the Sun Eater series. Just the way that each of his books end with the same sort of note, and also almost the lessons that the main character is getting near the end of Shadow of the Torturer. really seems like Hadrian and his upbringing sort of and very interesting to see that. So I suppose if you haven't tried Sun Eater, I could say you might get the same sort of vibes in the types of perspective that Gene is offering. Might be some of the perspective that Christopher Rocchio is kind of echoing a little bit, even though it's a very different kind of story. Uh, but yeah, that's those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. I do want to enjoy it, but I still don't quite understand where the hook is, where people want to read this over and over and over. Uh, and I might have to get to the end before I know that, right? Because I don't think it's for the prose necessarily, even though it's good prose. Some of it's great prose. I don't necessarily agree that every single line is put there for a reason, exactly the way that, like, I feel like maybe that's a little bit much. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It does feel like it. There's emphasis on the cult in the cult following, like where people just eat this up, and I want to know. I want to know what it is that they're really feasting on when they're reading this, because I am looking for it, and I'm not trying to be contrary. Like I do really want to experience that, because I did find it interesting and compelling, but utterly boring in a lot of ways. So we'll see. We'll see if I continue. I think I will go and maybe watch a podcast or two, even though I really don't want to watch like hours of podcasts to help me learn about what's happening in a book that's 250 pages long. But if that's what I have to do, then recommend some for me, and I'll watch maybe one or two of them, some kind of high level overview thing. But I don't, I hate the idea of being spoiled on the whole series as I'm going through. But I will defer to the experts out there. So anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.